Good evening. Welcome, everybody, back to Money Mixology. Jason here, as always. Today is our second episode in the series on money mindsets, and we mentioned a few of them that we were going to cover over the next few episodes. Today's episode is going to be about the poverty mindset. This is one of the most prevalent mindsets that financial planners have to deal with, that we have to try to overcome, because there is a large percentage of the population that has this particular mindset deeply embedded inside. One of the things, though, that I want to keep in mind for everybody, or I want you as the listener to keep in mind as we move forward, is it's not just people who come from a truly poverty-based background that can suffer from some of the scripting that happens with poverty mindset. There are components of the poverty mindset that can happen to people, even if they come from a background of middle class. This is because not every situation in your life when you had money as a child was considered perfect. You still weren't getting everything you wanted. You weren't always in a situation where anything you asked for was provided. Middle class families are going to have those times where there's a little less resources available. There's a little less money floating around for the kids to kind of get what they want or do what they want. So you're still going to learn some of these behaviors. On top of that, if your parents came from a background of poverty and they themselves have the poverty mindset, there is very high likelihood they did pass some of this down to you just through the behaviors and sort of the ingraining of the family culture, even if the family itself didn't have the money problems while you were growing up. So I do think that some of this is embedded in more people than they may recognize just based on their own background. And they'll have to kind of take a moment to step back and sort of explore their background a little bit and think through and say, yeah, maybe I actually do have a little bit more of this than I thought. It is also important that we frame this conversation in a way that you understand we are not trying to fix you. There is nothing to fix here. Having a poverty mindset doesn't make you broken. It doesn't make you wrong. It just makes it a tougher situation to make positive financial decisions moving forward. So what we're trying to do, we sort of joked in the last episode about mindsets were these kind of computer scripts that are running in the background. We're just trying to upgrade your software. That's really all this is. So it's going to be you 2.0. It doesn't mean there was anything wrong with what was going on before. We just want to put you to another level so you can begin the process of improving over time. So let's start the conversation by sort of understanding what is the script that's happening? What is the message that's running underneath the surface when you have the poverty mindset? It's really highlighted by a few key components. Number one, there is a massive tilt towards immediacy. When you come from a background of lesser means, lesser resources, when you're suffering from poverty mindset, you tend to believe that today is all that matters. And that makes some sense given the situation that in many cases, there is such a dire need for current resources, whether it's food or housing, whatever it may be, that the struggle today is all they can focus on. And that makes some logical sense. But it ends up happening that when they finally break free from that situation, they still struggle to look past today, sort of lift their eyes up to the horizon a little bit, because they just can't see the future when they've struggled to get through today over and over and over again. So today's problems become the primary mechanism at which they focus on all the time. There is also this idea that gets embedded in family units when there is a poverty mindset, which is that if you are being hyper vigilant about your money, that's the same thing as being responsible with your money. And again, this makes some sense because if you look at a situation where the only outcome we are trying to accomplish is to meet today's needs. Make sure we still have food and we still have shelter, still have water, all those really, really core necessities. If that's the only outcome we're being judged by, then being hyper vigilant to that appears to be responsible. It doesn't matter that you don't have the insurance you should have in case of a future emergency. You don't have an emergency fund set aside in case, future things come up. You're not investing for the future. You're not putting money aside for education. All these things that we believe make up a responsible financial plan aren't viewed that way. They're not viewed as responsible or necessary for being responsible when the situation is purely based on today's outcomes. So it ends up wiring someone that as long as they meet today's needs, they're being again, quote unquote, responsible, even if that's not matching up with what we would think of being responsible on a more macro level when it's talking about all of finance. You can see some of these poverty mindset scripts playing out in your life or someone you care about's life or someone you're trying to help with their money. If they have a background, you can see it playing out through a few pretty noticeable behaviors. One of them is cheaper versus quality. So people who suffer from the poverty mindset will often lean heavily towards cheaper products in today's terms, meaning sticker price cheaper, versus quality products that they won't have to replace over and over again. Again, to be super clear, we're not saying anybody's doing anything wrong here. We're trying to highlight what's happening. And it makes sense that if you barely have enough resources to get through today, then you would lean towards just getting what you need for today, even if it means you got to rebuy it again next week. I'll deal with that next week. That's outside of the normal time horizon I would ever think about if I'm in poverty mindset. So the fact that I'm going to have to do it again next week because I bought a low quality product simply isn't an issue for me. This plays out in a number of different ways. It's one of the reasons that lower income people have such a problem with health issues. And then therefore the health bills, the medical bills stack up and it piles onto the problem and it just gets worse and worse and we snowball because they're not viewing the higher quality food and food consumption as a priority because it's more expensive. So if all I need to do is just get cheap calories to get through today, if that's my mindset, then that makes some sense given my circumstance, but it will end up costing me in the long run. But as we keep saying, that's not relevant to this mindset because I can't actually focus on the future. I'm just not in a position to do that. And this is not because they don't want to focus on it. They very literally cannot focus on it. Their mind is just not in a position where it can take that risk, right? It can't look to the future. This also plays out. These folks will not invest. And it's not necessarily because they can't. That may or may not be the current situation based on their budget. You'd have to look at the numbers. But even if they do technically have a little bit of extra resources that they could invest, it's so far outside of their mindset because that is not a today problem. I mean, if I can barely worry about buying better jeans this week because I'm just going to have to buy, if I buy cruddy ones, I'm going to have to rebuy them in a month. If I can barely get myself to jump that hurdle and buy the slightly nicer jeans that'll last a year, I am certainly not going to be worried about what happens in 30 years when I retire. So you won't see investing for people who have the poverty mindset or even really, honestly, even savings, which would be the sort of the shorter term version of that. It's still outside of their time horizon parameters. So it's just going to be really, really difficult. They also don't do much negotiation at all. And that can be either on the salary side, which tends to show up in the sort of I don't deserve to get ahead type of mentality, which can poison people's mental health, or it could be on the purchasing side where the types of things they're buying just are not in a position to be negotiated. And so they just don't have that mentality. If you are in a situation where you must have a vehicle and you just have to have it like right now to get to work today, you're not going to be in a position to negotiate at all. You're going to be beholden to whatever offer is put on the table. And clearly, this ends up snowballing because you get less income, you're paying more for things under an emergency situation, and you can just never get off the hamster wheel. So these are things that are playing out in a sort of everyday life type of situation. You may also find that people with the poverty mindset, and this is one I would say flicks on even those who may have been raised with a little bit of money, or if you have a little bit of money now and you're not strictly speaking in the poverty situation, these might still be impacting you as that scripting running in the background. And that is purchasing things that you believe wealthy people purchase. So you are trying to mimic what wealthy people are doing by trying to sort of play in their sandbox without actually understanding if that's really what they are purchasing. A perfect example of this was mentioned by Dr. Dinsmore when he was on the radio show episode a few weeks back. And it's like when you get something with a credit card that has these what essentially are make-believe metals. So I've got a Capital One platinum titanium super vibranium credit card. Well, man, that must be what the wealthy people have. No, wealthy people have basic credit cards, right? And so those are an issue where you think you're entering their sphere, but it's really just being marketed to you because there are unfortunately unscrupulous people who know the poverty mindset, know how to take advantage of it, or in this case, just abuse it, and they will sell you products that really don't make any sense. If you find yourself going to the grocery store and you look at the shelf and you absolutely insist on buying the name brands of cereal, whatever product you're purchasing, and you just adamantly refuse to buy the store brands because you think that's what poor people do, is that they buy the store brands, you actually have it exactly backwards. People who have a decent amount of money and people who are growing their wealth are wise enough to understand those are the exact same products. They're made by the same manufacturers. They're just put into a different package and they're cheaper. So if I'm in a situation where I have money and I have my choice, I'm going to take the product that's the same quality, but that costs less. There is no brand loyalty to me as someone who has money in situations where we're talking about groceries. It may be for other products, but for something like groceries, it doesn't matter to me. I'm perfectly fine buying the store brand version of Rice Chex, whatever the case may be. So if you find yourself, not that you're choosing to buy the name brands, occasionally people will buy name brands, but if you're doing it because you cannot fathom being a part of the poor people that have to buy the store brands, your mindset is so warped by poverty mindset that you're actually viewing the situation backwards. I mean, it's literally flipped from the reality of what you would see if you were to analyze people who have money. This is where, again, these things will play out in daily life. And if you take a moment to sort of view your own life, you may see some of these patterns. Even if you weren't raised in a poverty situation, there may be these lingering scripts happening in the background that you're just kind of unaware of. The next thing I want to kind of talk about, though, is that with a lot of these scripts that we'll discuss, or these money mindsets that we'll discuss over the next few episodes, while I'm clearly identifying them as an issue we'd like to upgrade, we would like to overcome, it doesn't mean that we're not getting some positives out of these. People who come from a poverty mindset, there are some positives from that, and I don't think they should let those go, or that you should let those go as you begin to build your financial future. Many people that have poverty mindset are incredibly resourceful. If you have spent your entire life being forced to come up with creative solutions to make sure you have what you need, that's a skill set that is really beneficial even moving into the future. If you were able to feed yourself on $50 a week, upgrading to a new mindset where you want to eat healthy food, and that's going to be $75 a week, well, that's cool. There's no reason to just out of the blue decide I have the money, I'm going to start spending $125 a week. If you've been resourceful enough to do it your whole life on 50 and upgrading to quality food is going to be 75, then that's where you need to stop. And you need to continue to be resourceful and not just overspend simply because you can. So the resourcefulness and creativity is a really positive thing that I think we should take with us. The other part that I think a lot of financial planners struggle with, because statistically most financial planners come from families who had money, is that if you come from the poverty mindset, you have a lot of empathy for your fellow citizens who also suffer from it. You understand their background, you have a heart for it, you feel for the struggles that they had. You're just able to give solid advice. You're able to look back and sort of raise your community up with you because you understand the struggles they have much better than someone who never had these issues. This is another reason that I think everyone should do some digging into their psychology, their own internal scripting, to say, are there areas where I have suffered from poverty mindset? Because if there are, it will give you better empathy towards the people who are currently struggling with it. As you try to help them break out of it, it's much easier if you understand where they were sort of coming from in the first place. I think that we have to keep the good from our poverty mindset while trying to upgrade the areas where we're not as strong. Another key thing to recognize is that even if you personally are able to rise out of the technical poverty situation in terms of the money coming in, if you're now earning a decent wage or you become a high earner, it won't remove poverty mindset. This is one of the most critical things for you to hear as we talk about the mindsets over the next few episodes. These are hardwired into you. Now, they were not your fault. These are typically situations from your upbringing. It's a cultural, community, lifestyle, family embedded scripting in your mind, but it doesn't mean that just changing your circumstance will immediately erase all of that. It doesn't work that way. So if you're a high earner who comes from a poverty mindset or still has some of the poverty mindset markers in place, you may still continue to struggle to invest properly, because even though you have a ton of cash sitting in the bank, you just hoard the cash because cash has always been the key to your survival. And so you're just adamantly refuse to give up on that situation and to move it into more proper investments. So you just get really worried about it. You may be a workaholic. So if you come from a poverty mindset and you manage to work your way out of that and you're now at a higher earning level, your mind is completely set in its way that this is how I do it. I just work and work and work and work and work. And to the point where overworking can become a little bit of an issue. The other thing that I see occasionally is people who are struggling with the poverty mindset may view really positive opportunities that they have in front of them, whether it's a job promotion, whether it's a chance to invest in a new business, whatever it is that's sitting out there that could be really good for them, they view it as too big for me. I'm not worthy. There's no way that someone like me should be involved in this. It's too risky. They have all these situations where they'll put up personal roadblocks that will end up sabotaging their own possibilities. So that has nothing to do with your income level. If you believe that in your mind, you could be making $500,000 a year, but you're still going to avoid situations that could be even better for you. If you're stuck in this mindset of it's too risky and I'm just not worthy, or it's too big for me. So we have to be really, really careful and mindful of that thinking, that if the opportunity is being offered, it's being offered for a reason and you are worthy and capable and able to do it. So you should give it some serious sort of consideration on its own merits, not based on this fear you're kind of living in from the background. So the final part for today's episode is how do we, and I'm going to use this word loosely, fix it. And again, I prefer to use the term how do we upgrade our software in this situation. So there are a few things that we can do to help us begin to build a process that'll let us kind of break free from some of these mindsets. The first thing is we have to upgrade our systems. And I know this channel seems to harp on budgeting a lot, as it should. And I've told you from day one, I will die on this hill. So if you're going to begin to break free of this mindset, it's going to require better systems in place, better processes that will force you to do some future casting, some vision casting. You'll be required to do that if you're going to build a budget. It will also require you to put in place steps that are being taken that when those emergencies come up, you don't react emotionally. If you've been in this mindset for a long time, you know that the first sort of bad thing that happens, you're going to retrench. You're going to get a little panicked. You're going to pull back, wanting to fix it the way you've always fixed it, which is this emergency immediacy type of situation or response. If you know that's coming, then you have to build in essentially ahead of time steps that will prevent you from backsliding. So if you have a $20 a week, if that's all you can afford, that's completely fine. Put $20 a week into your savings account and it's automated. It just happens immediately. That way, when that emergency happens, you don't feel the need to scramble. The $20 is still going to go where it needs to go. You can respond with the other money. So start building some processes in from the place. And I understand small steps in the beginning. That's fine. Have somebody help you if you need to, but begin putting actual systems in place, processes that will protect you from yourself. Right? Let's get out of your own head, if you will. The next part you can do, and this is a little more of pure psychology therapy type of mumbo jumbo language, which is to do what's called future self narratives. So one of the things I really, really try to work with clients who have a poverty mindset is I want to understand, how do you view yourself in the future? What does the future you look like? Where do they live? What do they drive? What kind of job do they have? What do their kids do? What in sports are their kids involved in? And frame all of this in the positive light. What do they want their life to look like, even though it may not seem achievable right now? This is entirely about getting the person to break off the time horizon of just today, to start to expand the time horizon into the future. It does not in any way remove the struggles of today. I fully acknowledge that. It's still real. You have to eat today. It's still real. You have to have a place to live today. All of that is valid. I do not want to diminish that for you. But we have to get you to lift your eyes, push your vision out to the future, move the horizon out a little bit so that you can begin planning. There's no possibility I can convince you or your friend or whoever's struggling with this poverty mindset to do any future planning if they don't believe the future is even achievable. If they don't have any idea the future even is a thing that exists in the time horizon, then there's no way I can get them to plan for it. If they'll even acknowledge a small wish, desire, dream of some better future, that alone can open the crack in the door that we can start doing some actual planning to benefit them. That can be really, really powerful. The next thing I would recommend is that the person struggling from this mindset do some studying, or some research is maybe a little heavy word to use, but starts looking into what are wealthy people actually doing? Not the stuff you see on social media where it's all nonsense and lies anyways, and not talking to the one rich person you've ever met in your whole life, actually having conversations, actually trying to understand what is it that the life I think I want, how is it achieved? What does it actually look like? So that we can put more realistic parameters on it. I believe I mentioned earlier in one of the episodes a couple months ago about the book called The Millionaire Next Door. It's entirely a book that's meant to show us what wealthy people actually look like, act like, do on a daily basis in the United States. Something like that is incredibly powerful. And I used the really kind of jokey example earlier about the grocery store. Think about the power of changing just something as simple as understanding I don't actually need to buy the name brand. That's not what wealthy people do. Wealthy people save their money where they can. And if the store brand's equal in quality, then I'll just do that. If you did that a number of times and you did it in a few areas of your life, that could be dollars adding up quickly. Instead of buying the $6 box of Frosted Flakes, you buy the $3 Kroger Flakes or whatever they're called. You do that enough times for enough products over enough weeks of going to the grocery store, that's going to start adding up pretty quickly. And you're going to start to recognize, well, this is actually how people got the money they have. It's not the ways I thought they were getting it. So just studying a little bit about what the reality that you're aiming for really is. The final step then, after doing all those things, is to begin those micro steps. It is making a decision actively, purposefully, and intentionally. I'm going to go out, and this time when I buy this pair of jeans, it's going to be a slightly higher quality pair of jeans. I'm going to start to experience small wins. Now, I get it. This is going to feel very uncomfortable. Any kind of psychological change, by definition, will be uncomfortable. If you are trying to rewrite the coding, your internal computer is not going to like that. So you're going to have to take it slow and steady, but start making very conscious and purposeful decisions to say, this week, I'm going to do this one thing that is going to start to put me in the mindset of someone who has money. This is maybe where that creativity, resourcefulness can come in handy, because you may say, listen, I have to figure out a way to do this. This is going to become a goal of mine. I know it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be impossible, but I've done way harder stuff. I've been able to feed myself in the worst of situations for years. I think I can figure out where to get an extra $25 to buy some nicer shoes, or, whatever it is I'm trying to upgrade. So those types of very small decisions will begin to rewire you to understand, no, I am worthy of this, and to start to see the benefit from buying quality over quantity, and start moving your sort of internal wiring towards something that's closer to somebody who is secure in their finances. That's what we're aiming for. We're not aiming for rich. That's a goal that's in most cases not even well defined and is so far outside the realm for a lot of people. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about financially secure, financially stable, with an ability to then grow to wealth in the future. But that's never going to happen if you can't take step one, which is to say, I refuse to buy cheap stuff anymore. So I'm going to take the very first step, and I'm going to try my best to buy at least one quality thing. Instead of buying paper plates this week, because that's all I can afford, I'm at least going to buy one solid ceramic piece of dishware. And if I have to buy the mug for it next week, then so be it. But slowly over time, I'm going to start building a life of quality versus a life of quantity and cheapness. So if you can take those really small steps, your brain will begin to rewire itself, and you'll begin to sort of move the progress bar forward a little bit. So this is the challenge with poverty mindset is it's so embedded in us that we have to take very, very deliberate steps to start to overcome it. My ask for you today, no matter what your current situation is take a step back and take a moment to analyze your own thinking patterns. Do I have any of these thinking patterns that are still poverty based? Even if I was never raised in poverty, even if I inherited it from my parents, whatever it is, take a moment to analyze it. If you have these small little scripts running in the background, be very mindful of them, begin to analyze and address them, and see if there are steps you can take to upgrade the software. That will be a massive advantage to you. If you get nothing out of this other than buy quality over quantity, you'll be on a better path forward than you were 30 minutes ago when we started. So next week, we're going to dive into one of the other money scripts, which is the new money versus old money type of conversation. So we'll jump into that. But until then, everybody have a wonderful week, and thank you so much for joining us as always.